What's happening, y'all? DKB here. What's the good word? Good people. So, let me holler at y'all. We had the press conferences today. Heard from a couple players. Heard from the coaching staff, Robert Saleh, Mike LaFleur, Jeff Ulbrich. A couple gems that they dropped in regards to what we might be able to expect in the season, as well as just some things from the past, present, future type situations. So, to start it off, I guess going back towards the past, Zach Wilson last year, we know that there was a game plan that was originally set up in order to help his development. That ended up going awry, right? We had a passing in the coaching staff. We made some changes. By changes, we ended up adding to the staff in order to try to replace that experience that was lost and what the initial setup was going to be. So ultimately, we ended up trying to put as much experience around Zach Wilson, as much experience around the coaching staff as possible. And Robert Saleh broke that down a little bit. So for Rob Calabrese essentially being relegated to the, and I'm forgetting the exact position in my head, but essentially the quarterback coach, there we go. A lot of people were wondering, well, what's his resume looking like? This guy is kind of out of the blue for us. How did we pick him over a Matt Cavanaugh? Other players, other coaches out there that might have been more noteworthy, right? So Robert Saleh essentially mentioned that Rob Calabrese ultimately ended up being the main communicator to Zach Wilson in terms of philosophy, what the scheme dictates, what they're looking at on, a play-by-play basis, all that kind of stuff. Constant communication, but the main communicator, not Matt Cavanaugh, not John Beck, Mike LaFleur to a degree, but essentially, he's up in the booth trying to call plays where he's comfortable. The main person that's dealing with Zach Wilson in that immediate development is going to be Rob Calabrese. So he's been doing that last season. They've had a full off season to kind of develop not only as the players but the coaching staff and figure out what they want to do in order to accelerate the process for everybody. We decided streamlining things would be better. So John Beck goes back to doing his personal coach duties. Matt Cavanaugh is no longer with us, and then we keep it to Mike LaFleur and Rob Calabrese, who now is going to pick up some of these duties that he was being assisted by. If I'm remembering correctly, I believe he said Matt Cavanaugh ended up being more so of kind of like a quality control coach or assistant to Mike LaFleur to help him out, whereas John Beck was assisting more so Rob Calabrese. So a kind of interesting dynamic to see how that played out, but ultimately Robert Saleh even mentioned that he kind of foresees Rob Calabrese eventually getting into that offensive coordinator role, assuming that Mike LaFleur does good enough to get him a head coach opportunity elsewhere. So again, this comes into what we talked about before in terms of the coaching pipeline that they're essentially looking to create. One other note would be that they did mention a while back that they want to add a quality control coach to the staff, specifically for the offensive side. I think they might still need one for the defensive position as well. But they want to have somebody that's, sitting there they can develop in-house and then take over for, let's say, Rob Calabrese going to coordinator. Now they have this quality control coach that'll move up and take over the quarterback coach role and etc. Keep everything in-house. So I'm excited to see how that works out. And of course, we ultimately won't know how successful he's been until the season ends. But if it's true, and it wasn't just a little bit of lip service, Rob Calabrese did a pretty good job towards the end of the season once everybody was able to sit down and kind of break down things, give Zach Wilson a little relief, and kind of help him process what's happened in the first half of the season. So excited for that. Some other news. They mentioned that Zach Wilson, and this is coming from Mike LaFleur, he mentions that Zach Wilson's processing speed and ability is quicker. Robert Saleh touched on it a little bit further, saying that he's been able to kind of up his play tempo and cadence in how he wants the offense to operate. So that's about as good as we're going to get during the offseason, where we're not really running 11 on 11s. And they're trying to keep that contact to a minimum, essentially, to keep everybody healthy. And then the other thing to note would be that Mike LaFleur says how extra or how much more comfortable he notices Zach Wilson is. So he goes as far as to give us an example that he sees him dapping people up while he's trying to send in the play call. And then Zach Wilson going out there, things are running efficiently. So, a huge step in the process there. And I kind of take this from the standpoint that this applies to anything, right? If you're doing your job and you're working on a task and you have somebody trying to have a conversation off to the side, or you're doing something kind of minor that would take away from that, but you can still do the task at the same time, you know that you have a comfortable level or expertise with it. So I'm super excited to hear that as well. And then one of the final two things, everybody across the board, synonymously on a coaching staff, has essentially made a statement regarding everything about the offseason for us right now is health. With the rash of injuries that we've received, they don't want to do anything that necessarily would jeopardize that by going out of their way. So again, the mental neck up piece of everything, the techniques, and then kind of the installation, the walkthroughs. We're still a very young team. And then we're also bringing in a lot of new players as well, keep in mind. So that is going to be the priority. Health is number one. The moment we have somebody that goes down, I think we're not going to hit the panic button, at least not for the coaching staff necessarily, but us on the fans, and we will be a little bit squeamish at that point. So it's nice to see that the coaching staff is very aware, and they're kind of altering their entire game plan to account for that. And one of the last final nuggets, and maybe one of the most important concrete pieces of information we've gotten so far, is Jeff Ulbrich, defensive coordinator, mentioned that essentially he foresees anywhere between 30 to 35% of the snaps for how the defensive line rotation will work out. So think about a game where you might play, 60 snaps in a game, something to that effect. Depends on how well the opposite team is performing and stuff like that. But that essentially means when we're talking our starting unit, Jermaine Johnson, assuming he's on one side, Quentin Williams, John Franklin Myers, and then Carl Lawson will essentially get somewhere between 30 to 35 snaps a game, and then we'll be rotating in the backups. Jacob Martin, Vinny Curry, all of these other players that we have out there that may or may not make the team, but essentially for whoever does officially end up on the 53-man roster, that's essentially the breakdown we can see. Now, one of the reporters did call out that he had Nick Bosa, who's kind of played well and above beyond that. Jeff Ulbrich kind of tried to shuffle it under the rug a little bit, saying, well, it's Bosa. And essentially that, he's an outstanding player, and there's some exceptions to the rule. We'll see if that ends up being the case. We know Quentin Williams was gassed in previous years when he had to play a higher snap count, especially since he wasn't accustomed to that, only having a full year starting at Alabama and different things like that were going on for his situation. So it'll be interesting. I think it's primarily another way to make sure they do get everybody involved for the investments they made at that specific position. But secondly, there's another kind of a byproduct of them wanting to keep the health at an all-time high for the team as a whole. So if you don't have to worry about banging your body for 60 plays versus 30 to 35, it's perfect. We'll see how it goes, though. I think the hot hand statements that they mentioned before will always ring true. But either way, those will be the highlights for the press conferences that we just heard, at least as of yesterday, by the time you guys catch this. Let me know what you guys' thoughts are on some of these. Any other questions and things that you guys have. Other than that, I'll catch you again. Peace.